This episode was recorded in the Terrestream Mobile Recording Studio. Producer, Debbie O'Reilly. Sound engineer, Jeff Devine. Research, Patrick James Aslan. Theme music by Ari Posner and Ian Lefevre. Follow Under the Influence on Facebook for some behind-the-scenes fun. See you next week.
Fun fact, the very first Don't Squeeze the Charmin commercial was filmed in Flushing, New York. True story.
This is CBC Radio 1, 990 AM, 89.3 FM in Winnipeg.
What happens when 12 Australian students from completely different worlds swap lives?
I've only met one Aussie in my whole life.
New this month on CBC Gem, The Swap is a bold social experiment that sees communities, cultures, and religions collide.
You do what you want to do, it's fine. I'll do me.
Will they break down barriers, or will old divisions hold firm?
I want to be seen as me and not my hijab.
Find out in the 3-part documentary series, The Swap. Watch free on CBC Gem.
You know the feeling of finding a really good podcast? Or the feeling of someone always being there, like your favorite radio show? Stream CBC Podcasts, CBC Music, and CBC Radio anytime, anywhere. Download the CBC Listen app.
This is CBC News. At 12 o'clock, we're at 6 degrees with mostly clear skies over downtown Winnipeg. Good afternoon, I'm Matt Humphrey. A Portage La Prairie man has been sentenced to life in prison with no chance of parole for 16 years. 52-year-old Travis McLeod admitted to killing his common-law partner and their 2 young children. 32-year-old Chantel Murphy, 6-year-old Isabella, and 3-year-old Mason were found dead in the family's Portage La Prairie duplex in 2022. He will also have his DNA registered in a national database and is banned from ever having weapons. Winnipeg police have arrested 2 people in a disturbing case of child abuse. Constable Claude Chauncey says the parents of a baby girl took her to emergency in September because she was unresponsive. Her injuries were considered suspicious and were later determined to be from malnutrition and abuse. Chauncey says the child abuse unit was called in.
The infant is still in the hospital. And just to clarify, when we say infant here, we're speaking of an age under 1 year of age and defined in the criminal code as a newly born infant. So this is a very young girl here that we're talking about.
Chauncey says the 29-year-old mother and 33-year-old father of the baby were arrested this week. They're both charged with failing to provide the necessities of life. The father is also charged with aggravated assault. Winnipeg City Council has approved changes to the fees charged for fire responses to vacant buildings. City staff say the fees brought in to encourage building owners to fix up their properties backfired. The CBC's Cameron McLean explains.
Last year, the city began charging owners of vacant buildings for the cost of sending firefighters to battle blazes at their properties. They issued more than $1 million worth of fees to 43 properties last year. The average fee was $26,000, and one was more than $100,000. But the city stopped issuing new fines earlier this year. City staff say few people were paying, and the high costs may have discouraged some owners from making repairs. The city recommended lowering fees and introducing a process to waive fees for owners who fixed up their properties. Councillors approved a new set of lower fees, but raised them in some cases more than twice what city staff recommended. The new fees range from $10,000 for the first fire up to $50,000 for the 4th fire or more. Cameron McLean, CBC News, Winnipeg.
The federal government says it'll cut immigration levels over the next couple of years. Current levels, they say, are proving difficult to manage. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says the reduction has one main goal:
stabilize our population growth to give all levels of government time to catch up. Time to make the necessary investments in health care, in housing, in social services to accommodate more people in the future.
The number of immigrants accepted will be cut to 105,000 in 2025, then another 15,000 the year after, and a further 15,000 in 2027. Temporary residents already in Canada will be given priority in obtaining permanent residency. Ottawa hopes the cuts lower the pressure on the housing market and the healthcare system. Meanwhile, more than 100 daycare operators from across the country descended on Parliament Hill today. They're protesting against Ontario's funding formula for the $10 a day daycare. They call the system unfair and fear it will eventually be rolled out in other provinces. Nicole Williams has your details.
At what cost? At what cost?
Most of the protesters on Parliament Hill are for-profit operators who say Ontario's new funding model will hurt daycares. Starting in January, centres taking part in the federal program will have access to a pool of funding. How much they receive will be calculated by a range of factors, like where they're located, how many spaces they have available, and the ages of children they care for. Demonstrators don't want other provinces to follow in Ontario's footsteps.
The funding models, the cost control frameworks, are actually something that every province will have to have.
Crystal Churcher chairs the Association of Alberta Childcare Entrepreneurs, the group that organized today's protests. They've asked daycares across the country to close throughout the week in the hopes of sending a message that this new deal needs more work. Nicole Williams, CBC News, Toronto.
As many as 1/4 of Winnipeg homes could be exceeding the acceptable levels of radon. Radon is a naturally produced gas that can cause lung cancer. The last study was done a decade ago and found at that time about 7% of houses exceeded the 200 becquerel level, a measurement of radioactivity. The study's scientific lead, Aaron Goodarzi, says there are reasons for the rise.
New houses have higher radon. This is something building scientists have been observing as a trend across the country over the past dozen years. We've also been retrofitting our houses. We have been making them more airtight, but not necessarily have we been doing so in a way that considers how fresh air comes in and stale air leaves.
Goodarzi is encouraging people to test for radon in the lowest levels of their homes, like the basement, where people spend at least 4 hours a day. He says it is possible to vent radon through mitigation. You can deal with the radon. For news anytime, head to our website, cbc.ca/Manitoba, or you can use the CBC News app. Taking a quick look at the weather, a mix of sun and cloud in Winnipeg this afternoon with a high of 11 degrees, Brandon a few clouds and a high of 13 degrees. Dauphin a chance of showers, a high of 10. Flin Flon mainly cloudy, you're looking for a high around 7 degrees. Thompson a high of +4 and rainy, and on the bay in Churchill a high around 0 with a mix of sun and cloud.
Good afternoon and welcome to Radio Noon. I'm Laurie Hoogstraten, filling in for Janet Stewart. Lots for you on the show today. I'm really looking forward to our call-in because we want to know what's the word or phrase that makes you cringe, laugh, or call up the grammar police. Give us a call as we talk about language and how we use it and abuse it. Join us as we engage in language shenanigans with the word expert. That's after the 12:30 news. And after 12:15, a mother's story about how distracted driving caused the death of her 16-year-old daughter. We'll hear why she's telling her story. But right now, the Brandon police are posting pictures of puppies, not because they're cute, though they are, but because they've been abandoned on the street. It's not often that a police service posts dog pictures, but in this case, the puppies had been dumped in the east end of the city, and the police are alerting the public to help find the owners. They're also asking people not to put animals at risk by abandoning them. The story is all too familiar to Tracy Munn. Munn is the executive director at the Brandon Humane Society. Hello, Tracy.
Hello, Laurie.
So tell me, what was your reaction when you saw the Brandon police post about the 5 abandoned puppies?
Sadly, not as shocked as you would think it would be. I guess shocked more at where they were abandoned. If they would have been abandoned, we've had animals abandoned at our front doorstep, at our front gate in the middle of winter. So not as often as we used to see it. But I guess I'm just not as shocked. And I think there's just so many out there. People have been breeding, not getting their animals spay and neutered. And we're inundated everywhere. All of the shelters, all of the rescues are
Sure.
inundated and just not enough homes. And I think this is what people are doing.
So where were the puppies exactly, and what do we know about how they're doing now?
They are with at our Brennan boarding kennel, which is our city pound, so they'll be well cared for. I mean, our pound is really good, and animal control would have picked them up. I think they were found somewhere in the vicinity of one of our East End dog parks, and I think the reason people do that, they've put them where they think somebody will find them or someone
Sure.
will see them. The sad thing is anything can happen to an animal, especially when they're puppies. I mean, you can get things like an owl or a hawk. We're on that's near the outside of town, so anything could have happened to them at any point.
So what's going on at your shelter right now in terms of
Oh,
number of dogs and so on?
It's gotten a lot worse, Lori. When we spoke yesterday, everybody's feeling it. A lot of shelters and rescues have put a freeze intake on. Now, we haven't done that because we try our best to find fosters and places to put them. But since COVID, it seems to be that this is the fallout. They said to people, go out, get a dog, so shelters everywhere in North America started emptying. We did not. We got strict because we had the fear of what experts said, what would happen, that eventually these animals would come back more messed up. So I think people got out with good intentions, thinking, oh, I'll get an animal, I can walk, it's great for mental health, not realizing that what shelters put them through before they consider getting an animal, we put them through a criteria. We ask these questions. So an animal is not something you go out and get in haste. You don't think about the cost. You don't think about the time. You don't think about when you want to travel and boarding that animal. That's an extra cost. The vet care, I mean, that's made a big difference too. A lot of people, COVID did a real number on the vets. We lost a lot of vets. They went through a lot. And I know in Brandon, we lost 7 vets during COVID. So that you've got all this inundating of more animals and not enough vets, finding a place to live. Also in COVID, people were breeding. There were no animals anywhere because shelters everywhere emptied out. So people started breeding as a money-making scheme, I guess I call it. They shouldn't have been doing it. I mean, we shouldn't have backyard breeders. People like me, you, and the general public shouldn't be breeding animals. And these animals get out, they're not spay and neutered. We need a spay and neuter mandate. This shouldn't be happening.
And you're talking about, puppy mills or backyard breeders. Is that different than in other years? Did it really pick up during COVID? How have things changed?
I think it picked up for sure, Lori. The problem is we need strict legislation. These puppy mill people do it for money. It's just merchandise for them. So they get a slap on the wrist. They don't get enough. There needs to be stricter legislation. I think Manitoba has the strictest Animal Care Act, and I commend them on that, but our laws need to be stricter. We need legislation. These people need to be stopped because what they do is they get a slap on the wrist, they get a fine, they move on and they start up somewhere else. Well, what happens to all these animals? Poor Winnipeg Humane Society is inundated. It's crazy. It's gotten ridiculous, and people can't find places to live. I believe in Ontario, you cannot discriminate against pet owners. We need that across the board. Get a large damage deposit if that's what you need. But I mean, people have animals that are great. I mean, they don't damage houses. People just make that assumption. I think that's on the owner and being a good, responsible owner. But when you're going on to e-branding and Kijiji and, dogs for sale or for free, and you get them off, we often get calls, I got a dog off e-branded or Kijiji and they won't take it back now. And it's not housebroken and I can't afford it. And this is what people do. And then they call shelters and expect the shelters to take the overflow. And we just can't keep up.
And from your workers' point of view and your own, how do you cope with that? What is a day like if you're dealing with things at this level?
Crazy. We're going to try it again, Lori. A few years back, me and my assistant then decided, let's start a book. We want to start recording and keeping the statistics for how many calls we get a day for people giving up animals. And I'm not talking just people that are giving up their own animals. I'm talking people that are finding strays that at one time were owned animals that people abandoned. And after 2 or 3 weeks, I thought, this is crazy. We can't keep up. But we're going to try a better way of doing that so that we can actually keep statistics to show just how many people are doing this. It's crazy. Something has to change. And I think the answers are very easy. Legislation, mandating spaying and neutering, And these people that breed, like we talked about backyard breeders, this has to stop. If you want to be a breeder, you should have to have a license for it. You should have to pay to have a license for it. You only do it so often because a good legitimate breeder will take their pets back if there's an issue, if people can't care for them, if there's a healthcare issue. But backyard breeders don't. They do it, they make money, they don't care.
So why aren't these measures being taken, in your opinion? Because it seems to make sense, and there's animal suffering and there's people suffering, and these seem like steps, as you say, they seem like obvious steps.
Animals don't. It's so simple. It's just getting people to take those steps. This is what I don't understand, because I know laws and legislation aren't easy, but we can make our own bylaws in all of our cities and towns. We used to have pet stores, Lori. You don't see those. They're a thing of the past. I mean, we worked hard. I know I worked hard to make sure that the pet stores were closed here, and there will be no more open up, because the sale of animals just shouldn't be. I think the reason for it is because it's maybe just not important enough, but it has to become important because it's becoming an issue for everyone. And the animal control manpower and these animals, we shouldn't live in a society where it's okay to euthanize puppies and kittens and dogs and cats. Vets didn't go to school to euthanize healthy animals. So the answer is easy, but let's implement this. This needs to be implemented. Let's make our laws, even our bylaws, stricter. You own a cat or a dog, then you can't care for it. Then you know what? If you just give it up and you start dumping them, surrendering, let's have some legislation that you can't have one again. In the UK, they get it. When there's animal abuse cases, you don't get to own an animal again. These are simple steps to take, and they are important because the people matter also, right? There's a lot of people out there that need us to take their animals. They're going into a care facility. They've lost their home due to a fire and their job. There's so many good reasons. People that are having severe healthcare issues going in for treatment, they have no place to have their animals. It shouldn't be okay to dump these animals at most shelters are euthanized. They can't keep up. We're a no-kill shelter here, but it's difficult to do. And I'm not putting blame on pounds and shelters everywhere, because what is the answer? They need help. This shouldn't go on anymore. We need to band together and stop it.
And you talked about people who got pets during COVID, and I think a lot of people did that with very good intentions, but then
I agree.
It hasn't worked out. Are there any strategies for people who got a pet and they're all back at work? It's not working out. The dog is like chewing up everything in the house because, of course, it's all by itself. What can they do short of giving it up?
Well, this is what I said. We will help anybody. You don't have to just get an animal from our shelter. We're happy to help anybody. And this is what I tell people. If you're going to take vacation and get an animal, make sure that you continue your normal life. Take the dogs for a walk, but kennel your dog. Take your dog to doggy daycare. It makes a world of difference. Even 2 days a week, it's not that costly. Price them out. Get your dog out. Get them active, because all of a sudden you have a dog. You're home with your dog 4 or 5, 6 months of the year. You're working from home. All of a sudden you go back to work and you're not from home. Exactly. The dog has severe separation anxiety. They're chewing things. They're eating. Even at 2 years of age, because they've never been taught. So you basically have to go back to puppyhood, get them playing and exercising. And I said, daily walks are so important. It does for them what it does for us. We know what happens to kids when they don't have anything to do, so keep your dog busy and active. But like I said, doggy daycare is a great thing to do. Find a good behaviorist if you're having issues. And I say a good one because somebody just saying they do animal behavior doesn't make them a good behaviorist. Those are things you need to research.
Well, and it's good to hear that you obviously do not judge and you're willing to help people keep their pets. Oh, just one last question. What do you think will happen with the little puppies in the picture that the police
I think
found?
they'll be safe. I think they'll be safe, but here's the problem with that, Lori. It isn't fair. It isn't right, because what it's telling people, if you leave them in a box and you set them somewhere, they'll get scooped up, they'll get taken, they'll get adopted, and everybody's happy. But then what about the next person that plays by the rules and holds on to them until we can find homes? So that isn't the answer. And those people need to be charged. They can be charged if they're caught, and they should be.
Well, Tracy, thank you very much for all the information and for making time to be with us on Radio Noon. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lori, and thanks to CBC.
Bye-bye. Tracy Munn is the Executive Director of the Brandon Humane Society.
Your neighborhood, your community, your country, your world, your news that matters, news that belongs to you. Your World Tonight every night, 7 days a week on CBC Radio 1. On demand on the CBC Listen app and everywhere you get your podcasts.
It's coming up to 18 minutes after 12 o'clock. You're listening to CBC Radio Noon. I'm Laurie Hoogstraten. And coming up in just a few minutes, speeding, distracted driving, and impaired driving. The consequences are tragic. One mother will share her story of how her 16-year-old daughter died from distracted driving and why she's sharing her story now with high school students. And then after the 12:30 news, we're going to have some fun with words. Calling all word nerds, we're going to hear about a new book that will help you understand how language changes. But mostly we want to hear from you about the phrase that makes you cringe or laugh or want to become the grammar police. So give us a call at 204-780-0895 after the 12:30 news, and we'll play around with words. Hear what makes you crazy and what words you just like to say. Here's the forecast from Riley, and it's coming via Corey. Today, pleasant day for most of Manitoba. Good chance of flurries in Thompson, though, this afternoon and evening. And it's not very windy now, but it's going to pick up again through the day on Friday. Right now, we're looking for 11 degrees in Winnipeg. See if we get there. In Brandon, it's 2. In Churchill and the Paw, it's also 2. Gimli is 8. Dauphin is 5. Thompson, it's -1. And in Winnipeg, it's mostly sunny, a little bit of cloud, and 5 degrees. The MPI's Friends for Life speaker series is in its 13th year. More than 4,000 high school students across the province are learning the real-life consequences of unsafe driving. The lessons come from speakers whose lives have been impacted by the 3 major contributing factors to deaths on Manitoba roads. That's speeding, distracted driving, and impaired driving. Sandra LaRosa's personal story highlights the dangers of distracted driving. That ended in tragedy for her 16-year-old daughter, Kaylin. I had the chance to speak with her earlier this week. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
So tell me about Kaylin.
Well, Kaylin was, and still is really, just a shining light. In August of 2018, she got off work and decided she was going to go visit a friend out at a farm where he was house sitting. And she hadn't been out to the farm before, so I believe it was partially unfamiliar territory. And she got distracted by her phone, looked down at Google Maps on her passenger seat, and drove her car in front of an oncoming train.
I'm sorry.
And she was able to give the train crew her name after the impact, but soon after started seizing and was the paramedics sedated her right on scene. She was flown to Saskatoon's pediatric intensive care unit after a stop in Regina for emergency surgery. And she fought for 6 days, but on the 5th day, which was her 17th birthday, they told us that if she pulled through, she would likely have no quality of life. So we decided to end medical treatment on her birthday. And then eventually the next morning, she was pronounced medically brain dead.
And that was in 2018?
August 2018, yes.
And what has your life been like since?
A whirlwind. Initially, it was shell shock. You don't know whether you're coming or going. Don't know whether you should continue going. It's hard. It's something that, I had friends who have lost kids before me. And every time you hear about an accident or one of your friends losing a child, the first thing that you could think of is I don't know how I should go through that. I don't know how they do it. I don't know how they do it. And then you're put in that position And your first, instinctual thought is, how am I going to do this? And you slowly realize that you can. You can continue putting one foot in front of the other. I knew very early on that to honor Kaylin and to do what she would want me to do by continuing on, I had to turn my grief into a passion. When I found out that her phone was the main reason of her accident, which I had said in hindsight, I had said that in the hospital before they told us she wasn't going to make it. I told my husband that if her phone had anything to do with her collision, I wasn't going to keep quiet. And I fought. I mean, I will go to whoever will listen to me to get stricter penalties and higher fines, and to keep continuing on and sharing it and ensuring that people live. Because ultimately that's my goal. I just want everybody to live a long, full life. And I do it for Kaylin.
You're doing it for Kaylin, but it sounds like you're helping a lot of other people along the way, because I know you talk to students a lot. And what kind of questions do you get from them?
Like at the end of my presentation, it's sort of a heavy presentation, so it doesn't leave a lot of room for questions. It's not, they won't ask in front of each other anyway. So when they do come up and talk to me, I get obviously a lot of condolences.
Sure.
And then I also, get the, I initially got, how did she not hear the train? And when I first wrote my presentation, I didn't actually have this in my presentation, but her music was so loud that she didn't hear the train. And, it's a lot of the teachers ask me, how do I do this? And I get that asked by a lot of people, like, how can I go up and relive the worst part of my life? And the simple answer to that is I relive it anyway.
Yeah.
Every morning that I open my eyes, she's not here. So I relive it every day. So to me, it makes more sense to relive it and save lives, potentially.
And in your presentation, I know you use photos, you speak, you have songs, and you've mentioned some of the things that you've shared. What other things do you say?
I encourage students to have an impact on others. Our youth are strong. They're a force to be reckoned with. And I share with them that they need to realize the impact that their friends have on their lives and the impact that they can have on their friends' lives. Distracted driving is a simple bad habit. And if it can become normalized to not use your phone when you're driving, the habit's broken.
Mm-hmm.
I mentioned in my presentation that most people wouldn't get behind or in a car with somebody that's drinking a beer behind the wheel. A phone's no different. The only difference between a phone and alcohol is that almost everybody has a phone. Not everybody will be holding that beer.
Mm-hmm. And of course, it's not only young people who look at their phones when they're driving, but that's who you're focusing on. Why do you feel that that's the group to focus on?
I focus on teens because I think they can relate. They see Kaylin up on the screen and they see her as a child and as a teenager and what she missed out on and things, and I touch on things that are important to teens. She didn't get to graduate. She didn't get to buy a grad dress. She didn't get to have her hair and makeup done. She got a driver's license, but she never had a career. She won't tell me that I'm going to be a grandma. All these things that milestones that they want to reach can be taken away in a 10-second glance down.
Well, I can imagine the impact on the students of your presentation just from the impact we're all feeling listening to you, and you're doing what you can. But what else needs to change?
Well, I think for myself and what I've learned in the last 6 years is it needs to be normalized to just not use your phone. You need to have that disconnect. And I do think that the governments in both Manitoba and Saskatchewan have taken one step forward in removing the phones from the classroom. Because if the students have that disconnect for the 6 hours that they're in a classroom, they can realize that it's not the end of the world if they're not on their phone in the 15-minute drive home. But the other part is, and I touch on this point in my presentation too, that this isn't a teen issue, like you said. This is a people issue. And parents, you need to realize your kids are watching you. And if you're on your phone, texting, changing a song, answering it, talking, they see you. And children learn what they live. And they're going to mirror your actions. And one day, them mirroring your actions could be their last day.
Yeah. Sandra, thanks very much for being with us today.
Thanks for having me.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Halen, who died after being hit by a train when she was distracted by her phone. LaRose is one of the speakers presenting her story to students across the province as part of MPI's Friends for Life speaker series. It launched this week. She lives in Tyven, Saskatchewan. You are listening to Radio Noon. It is 29 minutes after 12 o'clock, and I've just got time to let you know that after the 12:30 news, we are calling all word nerds. Our call-in today, it's all about language and phrases you love or you loathe. We want you to share your pet peeves, fave phrases, and questions about language with us as we welcome the author of a new book. And the book is called Says Who, a kinder, funner, yes, she uses the word funner, usage guide for everyone who cares about language. So give me a call, 204-780-0893, and let's gripe and explore language. You're listening to Radio Noon. The news is next.
This is CBC News. At 12:30, we're at 7 degrees with partly cloudy skies over downtown Winnipeg. Good afternoon, I'm Matt Humphrey. The parents of a baby girl are under arrest after she was brought to hospital unresponsive. Winnipeg police say sometime in September, the baby was found to have suspicious injuries. Constable Claude Chauncey says on September 24th, the Child Abuse Unit was called in to investigate. Almost 1 month later, police made the arrest.
Obviously, when doctors investigate these injuries, they were able to determine that they were caused by malnutrition and abuse. So that's where the charges stem from.
Chauncey says the infant is still in hospital. A 29-year-old woman and a 33-year-old man have been charged with failing to provide the necessities of life. The man is also charged with aggravated assault, and they have both been detained in custody. 2 people have been charged with drug trafficking after police searched a home in Osborne Village. Officers found $136,000 worth of drugs in a home along Wilmot Avenue, along with drug packaging material and ammo. A 46-year-old man and a 37-year-old woman face numerous charges. And finally, down south, with less than 2 weeks to go in the U.S. presidential election campaign, Kamala Harris took part last night in a CNN town hall event in Pennsylvania. And it appears Donald Trump was watching. Karen Pauls explains.
Vice President Kamala Harris was asked questions by undecided voters ranging from fascism to food prices, immigration, Gaza, and anti-Semitism. She was most passionate when she focused on her Republican rival, saying former President Donald Trump is unstable and unfit to serve, even agreeing with the statement that he's a fascist. But it may be pocketbook issues Americans are more concerned with, like price gouging.
We saw it actually during the pandemic as well, where because of supply chain issues, there was a reduction of supply, and then they would inflate the price of everyday necessities.
Trump did respond to Harris on social media, saying in part, "Comrade Kamala Harris sees that she is losing, and losing badly. So now she is increasingly raising her rhetoric, going so far as to call me Adolf Hitler and anything else that comes to her warped mind." Karen Pauls, CBC News, Washington.
And that is your CBC News from Winnipeg. For news anytime, you can head to our website, cbc.ca/Manitoba, or you can use the CBC News app.
Thanks very much, Matt. And before you go,
Yes.
I have a question for you. Our call in just a minute is all about language. We're calling all the word nerds and grammar police to weigh in about words or phrases. Okay, I thought you might be able to answer the call. Do you have a word or phrase that you love or hate?
Oh, don't make me choose. There are so many, like when people, like we've stopped using effect because it's so hard to choose between if it's an effect or an affect. So people just say impact.
Well, there's that.
But that's not it.
Okay.
You know what really curdles my milk?
What curdles your milk,
What
Matt?
really twists my stash?
What twists your stash?
That gets a wag of the finger. You know what it is?
No.
It drives me crazy, and it comes up a lot in news. One bad apple doesn't spoil the bunch.
It doesn't?
That's not the phrase. And over time, since it was like first jotted down by some lord in the 14th century, it has become the opposite of its intent. The phrase is one bad apple spoils the bunch.
Yes.
And anyone who knows about apples and barrels will tell you one bad apple spoils the bunch. But over time, you'll notice people use it to say one bad apple doesn't spoil the bunch.
Oh, that's right.
And one individual's behavior is not indicative of the entire group. But the phrase is actually, it does spoil the bunch.
Got it. Thank
And
you.
That one we use a lot.
That rankles.
Anyways, thanks for listening to me gripe.
Thank you very much.
You know what
Matt.
else bothers me?
Yeah, tell me. We've only got
The
26
creature
minutes.
is called Frankenstein's monster.
Oh, right.
Okay? I've talked about this before.
It's not Frankenstein. Frankenstein
No,
isn't the guy with the bolts.
He's a man.
Yeah.
Frankenstein's a man.
He's a scientist.
Yeah. And part of the thing about the book, the modern Prometheus or whatever, Frankenstein, is that he doesn't have an identity. The monster is upset because he doesn't have an identity.
Who wouldn't be, really?
Yeah, exactly. He's just an amalgamation of body parts, so he's upset. It's almost Halloween.
It's almost Halloween. Well, thank you very much, Matt.
Yeah, back soon.
All right. That's Matt Humphrey, and we know what he thinks about a few things. And I'm now joined by Riley Lachuk, who's going to talk about the weather, but I've got to ask you too, Riley.
I have to say, it's something that I've heard from the younger generation.
Oh, yes?
I don't know. I don't know why this bothers me, but it makes me grind my teeth when I hear it, when people say things like, I can't deal.
Oh.
Or I can't even.
I can't even.
What does that mean?
What does that mean?
I don't know.
I'm baffled myself.
It makes me grind my teeth.
Yeah, I get you. I can't even. I can't even,
deal.
Riley.
I can't deal with today.
Can you deal with the weather?
You know, it's very seasonal. Back to very seasonal conditions, Lori. Another cool-ish morning. Expect those -1s, -2s. That's seasonal for this time of the year. So we're changing the seasons here. I will remind that in just a couple of weeks from now, we hit the time change.
Yes.
So once we get into early November, we're going to start seeing sunsets at about 4:45 in the afternoon in about 3 weeks.
3 weeks.
From now. So
that's dark early, but light early?
But lighter early.
Yeah. I kind of thought that when I was taking on this noon show gig. I thought, it'll be light by then because the time will have changed, but it didn't.
Yeah, okay. 8 degrees in Winnipeg right now. It's 7 in both Gimli and Victoria Beach, as well as in Dauphin. Brandon, Melita, 3 and 5 at the moment, and on the freezing mark. In northern Manitoba, a bit of cloud cover. Radar showing a little bit of instability. I think a lot of this is either A, radar junk, or B, stuff that's not actually making it to the ground. Right now, we are under a mix of sun and clouds across southern Manitoba. But there is the chance that we could see, particularly through the Parkland region, maybe a couple of showers through the afternoon. I'm talking a very slim chance, if at all, through the afternoon hours. The best chance for precipitation today into northern Manitoba, particularly through the late afternoon into the evening. Could see a couple of flurries through places like Thompson, moving east overnight into places like Gillam and Shamattawa. So not talking an accumulating snow, but a couple of flurries as we head into the later part of today and into tomorrow for parts of northern Manitoba. Mix of sun and clouds across the south this afternoon. 10 in Winnipeg, 11s in Brandon, Portage. I think we can get to 11 in downtown Winnipeg this afternoon as well. 3 in Thompson, the high this afternoon. Your long range looks like this. 10 degrees for both Friday and Saturday. 13s, 14s, a mix of sun and clouds through the weekend. And I have 8-degree high on Tuesday. And lows, for the most part, staying above 0 for the next few days.
Sounds okay.
There you go.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Riley.
You're welcome.
That's weather specialist Riley Lachuk, and you can hear him this afternoon on Up to Speed, and of course see him on television on the news at 6. You're listening to CBC Radio Noon. I'm Laurie Hoogstraten, filling in for Janet Stewart. And our call-in should be good fun today. We want you to give us a call at 204-780-0893 because we want to know, what are the words or phrases that annoy you or bring you joy? Do you want to scream every time you hear someone murder a word? Or can you barely hold back the urge to correct the grammar of someone's text or comment? Perhaps you're a fan of commas, but an enemy of exclamation points. Sometimes words or slang are just fun, like riz for charisma. And who doesn't drag the word brouhaha into conversation every chance you get? Our call-in guest today is Anne Curzon. She is an English professor at the University of Michigan and a regular contributor to Michigan National Public Radio's That's What I Say weekly segment. She's written a book called Says Who? A kinder, funner, yes, funner, usage guide for everyone who cares about words. She joins us now. And I'd like you to have our numbers, 204-780-0893, or you can text me at 204-588-7355, and tell us what you think about language and its evolution. Hello, Anne.
Hello. Delighted to be here.
Oh, it's great to have you. So we have lots of calls already, if you can imagine, but
I believe it.
I believe it too. I don't know if you had joined us yet, but I asked both our newsreader and our weather person. It was like, okay, well, fine, we get it. So we have to do a show now.
Know.
Yeah, people get
and
it.
I love the example of the apples in the barrel.
Yes,
and
one
the
bad
idea
apple.
that this idiom has changed over time. So one of the key things is that language changes. It's part of a living language. And as someone who studies the history of English, I get to study that change over time. How have we gotten from Beowulf to texting?
Mm-hmm.
And that example of the apples had me thinking about another well-known idiom, which is to pull oneself up by one's bootstraps.
Mm-hmm.
Which, Laurie, what does that mean for you?
Well, for me, it means to make something of yourself. By yourself.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Sometimes sort of seen as the American dream, right? You can do it on your own. Well, when this came into usage in the middle of the 19th century, it meant to try to do the impossible.
Oh.
Because, of course, if you have the little strap at the back of your boot and you try to pull yourself up, it is impossible. And there were these wonderful quotes that said things like, trying to pull yourself up by your bootstraps is like trying to put yourself in a wheelbarrow and wheel yourself around.
Okay.
But of course,
fantastic.
idioms mean what idioms mean. And now that idiom means to do it on your own and achieve your goals by yourself.
Well, and sometimes we're not that crazy about change, but what I'm going to go straight to the phone lines and let you, Anne, comment on what our listeners have to contribute. Eleanor, what do you think about language? Do you have something that you love or hate?
Oh, yes. And it comes across the media waves in a couple of months. We're having February.
February, yes.
And February just makes me scream and choke. And, and it comes across so often. So that's about all I should say.
Well, thank you, Eleanor. My birthday's in February, so I try to make a point of pronouncing it properly. Thank you very much for your call.
I love that. And I noticed the way you have to slow down. It is actually very hard to say with both the R sounds in it. They're so close together. And English, like many languages, does this sometimes, where we will delete a sound over time, as has happened for many of us in February as opposed to February. Let me give you an example, which is the word OFTEN.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Laurie, do you say this with or without the T?
I say it without. I say often.
And that is, well, so if you go back about 500 years, often had a T. But then we dropped the T in the same way that we dropped the T in a word like listen and hasten. So you also got often. But what's interesting to me is now in the very literate society in which we live, you see the T coming back because people assume that it is sloppy and lazy to leave the T out.
That's why I
so
leave it
you
out.
will hear a lot of people say often.
Often, but it is often. It's often.
Often it's often, but now often it is also often.
Oh, right. Okay. I think we better go to the phone lines before we bury ourselves in often. That's Heather. Welcome to Radio Noon. Hello, Heather.
Oh, hi.
Hi.
Good to be there here, Lori. I don't have an idiom.
Mm-hmm.
I get very upset or feel disappointed when people talk about tolerance. For me, it's not anywhere near enough. We need compassion and listening and acceptance and being open to difference. So tolerance doesn't work.
Tolerance just doesn't convey what you want to,
right.
the meaning that you want. Right. Okay.
Not enough.
Oh, great. Well, thank you, Heather.
And Heather, what's clear to me is that you're a wordie. You're someone who cares deeply about words and their power. And you're absolutely right that thinking about which word captures what you're trying to capture, and there are real differences between tolerance and compassion. And so I'm just really grateful that you're not thinking about, what is quote unquote right or wrong, but what is the most effective way to be using the language to convey what I want to convey at this moment.
Yeah. Well, we have lots of callers on the line, but we have room for more. Give us a call, 204-780-0893, and we'll go to Jerry. Hi, Jerry.
Hello. Hello.
Hello. Hi, Jerry. What would you like to say about language and its evolution?
I'd like to recite a sentence which combines 4 or 5 really bad mistakes.
Okay.
The sentence is, have you got the money I borrowed you?
Oh.
What money? I never lent no nothing off of yous.
Yeah, that covers a lot of ground.
The off of is terrible, and it's used by national newscasters. Off of.
Off of. Oh,
terrible.
Yeah.
Pluralizing the word you, use. Borrow and lend are used completely wrong, opposite. And there's a double negative. So what money? I never let no nothing off of yous. And there are people in North America who think that's good English.
Wow.
Really burns me.
Jerry, your contribution is worth about 10 callers. Thank you very much.
Okay.
All right.
Take care.
Take care of yourself. We're going to keep on with the callers. We have so many. Hi, Jane. Hello, Jane.
Oh, hello.
Hello.
I have one that I believe is always done wrong. It's got present, past, and future, and it's the word forecast.
Oh.
It can be used as is for the present, past, and the future. But so often we hear it is forecasted at.
Oh.
So I think I'm right on that. Is your guess there?
Anne, what do you say?
Yeah, well, so between Jerry and Jane, we've got a lot here.
Yes.
So Jane, I hear in your, if I understand your concern correctly, it is that people are making forecast behave like a more regular verb by adding ed to make the past tense?
Correct. Yes.
Right. And this is something, again, you're going to hear me as a historian of the language say, we see this where, for example, the verb help used to be, the past tense of help used to be holp. In the same way that we get like drive, drove, you would get help, holp. But over time, that became a regular verb where we get help, helped. So I hear it with forecast. I hear it with broadcast. People concerned about what exactly is the past tense. And I think you're right. We're seeing some change there. Lori, if it's okay, I'd love to go back to a couple things that Jerry said in his. So let's take use. So
use, guys.
New plural form.
Yeah.
Well, right. So if you go back far enough, you used to only be the plural second person because we had thou and thee. That was the singular, and then it was the plural. And then over time, as thou became archaic, you became both singular and plural. So we say you are one person and you are many people. But in dialects across the world, you are seeing new variants to create a new plural. So you have y'all across much of the southern United States, or all y'all.
All y'all.
You get use guys, you guys, or in Pittsburgh, yins. And these are all new plural to create a singular plural distinction with you. Now, the double negative is really interesting. If you go back to Beowulf's time, 1000 AD, or Chaucer, double negative was actually the standard in all varieties of English. So the equivalent of we don't have none was English grammar in all varieties. And then it just so happened that the variety that became standard in the Renaissance moved to single negation, as in we don't have any. But many, many varieties have retained the double negative to say we don't have none. And people will sometimes say to me, well, those two negatives cancel each other out, which we know they don't. If someone says we don't have none of those, there are no, whatever that is, there are none of those. And people say, well, but in math, two negatives cancel each other out. To which I have two responses. One is, well, language is not math. And the second is, okay, even if we did math, if you multiply two negatives, yes, you get a positive. But if you add two negatives, you just get a bigger negative.
Okay, now we're dragging in math. This is becoming a problem. It's so interesting the way it jumps back and forth. And I'm just looking at our lines all lit up, as they say. So we're going to add more to this conversation. Welcome to Radio Noon. Hello.
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 Yes, what really bugs me is when people throw H's behind S's, like stress and strain, and don't bother to sit down, because if you do that, when you do this, you'll be saying something else entirely. So I just wanted to mention that among multiple other words, like what happened to many. Anyway, so those are just a few examples of what really bugged me.
Okay, we'll ask Anne to comment. Thank you.
So, Lori, I missed the second one. The first one, I think, is something that I've heard from other listeners and audience is street as opposed to street, where we're getting a sh sound as opposed to a s sound. And I'm waiting. This is definitely happening, and I'm waiting to see good research on it. So right now I can't speak to exactly how that's distributing, but Ken is absolutely right that is something we're hearing. What was the second issue?
Oh, you know what? My brain has too many holes in it to retain that thought for longer.
Okay,
Sorry,
but you're absolutely right in hearing the sh, that sh sound, and linguists are on it.
Okay, well, we'll stay on the phone. I have millions of questions to ask you, Anne, but we have so many people calling in who want to get your response that I'm just going to keep asking. Hello, Chaz.
Hello.
Hello. What would you like to contribute to this wordy conversation?
So, I've got two.
Okay.
First one is when people say lay instead of lie.
Oh yeah.
Or laying. So I'm laying down on the bed, and what are you laying on the bed? So that one bugs me. And then because I'm a realtor, I hear realtor a lot of times.
And it's realtor. Yeah.
It's realtor.
Okay.
So those are mine. There's others, but I'm going to leave it at that.
Oh yeah,
but
lay and lie.
I'm really enjoying listening to this. It's very, very interesting.
Yeah, well, it's very interesting to have you call in and contribute. Thank you very much, Chaz.
Thank you.
So, Anne, lay and lie.
Lay and lie. And lay and lie, we're confused because it's confusing. So these two verbs are actually historically related, which is why it's confusing. So you have lie as the intransitive. In other words, it takes no object. And the past tense of lie is lay. And then lay is its own verb, which is the transitive, as in I lay something down. And then the past tense is laid something down. But we are seeing some variation here in terms of whether lay can be intransitive. As Chaz said, I lay on the bed in the present tense, or in the past tense. I'm sorry. But what I would ask Chaz is, I've been tracking the expression to lie low.
Yes.
So historically, it's been to lie low because it's intransitive. But you will hear a lot of people say, I'm just going to lay low. And I think that's coming to feel pretty standard to people, but it is historically, quote unquote, incorrect. But it's a change that I think is happening.
Well, I think Bob Dylan has a lot to answer for with Lay Lady Lay. His song, Lay Lady Lay, Across My Big Brass Bed. No. It's Lie Lady Lie, but it just doesn't sound right. Anyway, we shall move on. Hiroshi, good afternoon.
Hello.
Hello.
Oh, hi.
What would you like to mention?
Well, I this is probably an old one, but people who always say karaoke really drives me nuts because it should be karaoke. It's never like, I don't ever see, I mean, if you look at the spelling, it's karaoke, not karaoke.
Oh. All right. Point taken. What do you say, Anne?
I say, sorry for the ways in which we Englishify words. We, of course, do this all the time with borrowed words. Sometimes this is where politics can come in, where there are people who argue that U.S. speakers would say Sputnik as opposed to Sputnik because you didn't want to use the Russian pronunciation. That would be too respectful. But we often take borrowed words, and English has borrowed a lot, and we make them adhere to the sound patterns of English. So there's a great example of, in the middle of the 19th century, there was a complaint about the pronunciation balcony and someone said, it's enough to make you sick. Because when it was borrowed in from Italian, the stress was on the second syllable. It was balcony. But English, as a Germanic language, we often move the stress to the first syllable, so it became balcony. So this happens with borrowed words.
Well, just as you know, it's always, language is always in transition, let alone with using other adopted words from other languages and so on that we can either mess up or tune up or do something to. We're going to try and squeeze in a few more calls. Elvira, you're on the line. Hello. I think Elvira's on the line.
Oh, hello.
Hello. What?
Oh, it's, I'm sorry. It's Elvira.
Oh, I beg your pardon. Elvira.
It's no problem.
See, there we go. The pronunciation.
Using I when it should be me, and using me when it should be I. For example, Mary and I will receive a car. So Mary and I is in a subject of a sentence. But then for me, it should say, they have a new car for Mary and me. And then there's a preposition for. So people don't use, after prepositions, they've started saying Mary and I. But it should be Mary and me. And I always tell my daughter, take away the Mary. They have a new car for I. No, that doesn't sound right. They have a new car for me.
A good way to catch it. Very good way to catch it.
Yeah.
Well,
so anyway,
Elvira,
that really bothers me.
Oh, well, thank you for letting us know.
Okay.
All right.
Well,
Thank you.
Elvira, you're in very good company with my mother, who also had very strong feelings about this. And the story in our family, which is true, is that in the middle of a wedding toast by my younger sister for my older sister, and my younger sister in the toast said, for my husband and I, and my mother from the back of the room piped up, and me, in the middle of the toast. So what we're seeing here is a long-term change in the history of English. So, and I'll try to give you the really short version, but English used to make a distinction between subject and object for all nouns. So if you take a noun like dog or rose or table, it would have had a different form in subject position and object position. And we lost that over time, except in the pronouns. So the pronouns, most of them, still distinguish between subject and object. So I, me, we, us, they, them, she, her, he, him. However, let's think about you. So you is the same in subject and object, but that wasn't always true. It used to be ye as the subject and you as the object, but that collapsed, and it collapsed during the Renaissance. And actually, if you look in Shakespeare's plays, you will see that he cannot keep ye and you straight. He uses both of them as subjects and objects. And Shakespeare actually has an example of the equivalent of between you and I, which Elvira said it should be between you and me. But this confusion or variation between I and me in this X and Y construction is old. And you're absolutely right, it's happening. As a historian of the language, I am tracking it. And I'm going to ask an impertinent question here that I'm going to leave listeners to think about, which is, at this point, a construction like between you and I, or between my friend and I, is used, as Elvira points out, on National Public Radio, on TV. You'll hear it in very educated places, in very educated speech. And so the question is, how many educated speakers need to use between you and I before we say that is educated speech?
And we're going to have to leave it there as a question for the ages. Thank you very much, Anne Curzan, whose book is Says Who. Lovely being with you. Thanks a lot. You've been listening to Radio Noon.